Hello, welcome to Billy Nut Joe's Rant, and happy Easter. I am mentioning that purely for the fact that it is Easter, not that I'm actually going to be talking about much of Easter things right now. Because right now, I'm thinking about historic stuff. And while Easter probably definitely has some history, I am not aware of it. However, I am aware of the history of other histories. So let's talk about one of those. For example, one random history event that came to my mind is a history event that I think everyone can learn from. Because what's the point of learning history if you don't learn from history? You're both learning about history, and history is teaching you. It's quite unusual, but also quite interesting. The thing that I'm talking about is what is known as the Prohibition era. What was the Prohibition era? Well, just by going off its name, it would suggest it was an era where people were for prohibition. I don't know what prohibition means, but I do know what prohibition means. It means like the ban of something. And that something that was banned was alcohol. Because the United States legislator guys, whoever those were, they looked at the current legislatives, and they said, you know what? There's too much alcohol. Let's ban alcohol. So they did that, hoping to decrease the amount of alcohol in circulation. And did it achieve that? Well, on the surface level, yes. Because now it seemed like less people were drinking. But the truth was, more people were drinking, but they were just doing it in secret because it was now illegal. If something is causing problems, which in this case was alcohol, banning it seems like a good solution. Because after all, if you ban something, it is now illegal to have that thing. And then the law will be involved. Ooh, spooky. But the problem with that is, just because something's illegal doesn't mean it's impossible. Which means people were still doing this, but now they're putting themselves, and also law enforcement, in danger, trying to do the exact same thing as if the ban had not been in place. And in doing so, I can only imagine that it probably drove up the cost of alcohol, which ironically would help people in that business. For a more kid-friendly metaphor, it basically just took all their common trading cards and turned them into rares, and also made them illegal. And the lesson to be learned from this story is that people who want what they want will really want it. For the average Joes, did this decrease alcohol consumption? Almost definitely, because people tend to not want to do things that are illegal. But for the big companies, now, instead of just being a business empire, they're now crime empires, and behaved as such, leading to an increase in crime, which was the whole point of the alcohol ban in the first place. They wanted to decrease crime caused by consumption of alcohol. But instead, they increased consumption of crime caused by alcohol. It was a very unfortunate situation, but luckily, now, legislators today can look back on what happened and think, maybe next time, instead of just banning something, we could come up with more creative and non-crime bossy ways of improving the situation. So it really was a good thing that prohibition happened, just, like 100 years after the fact. It wasn't a good thing at the time. And we're very lucky that prohibition happened in the era that it did, because if it happened, 400 years before that, when no one had any way of preserving history, then that would be bad, because then the entire thing would just have been repeated time and time again until someone actually did catch on to the fact that this is causing a problem. Which means the more recent a history is, the more easy it is to understand. Which is what makes dinosaurs so intriguing. Information on dinosaurs is constantly being updated and outdated. For example, the Spinosaurus, a dinosaur that it's one of the most popular dinosaurs, but it's gone through a lot of design changes. Although not really, because the actual Spinosaurus probably didn't have too many variations before the whole extinction event. But because of just the fact that paleontologists were not around at that time, and so they only have the bones to go off of, and the bones are a relatively small amount of the percentage of the actual creature, Spinosaurus went through many different updates and design changes, each one getting progressively more, aquatic-y. And these kind of things can get really confusing if you go back and look to those cutesy, fun dinosaur facts for kids books from 10 years ago, and you look through them, and you see just how many things are not correct anymore. I haven't actually done this, but I'm assuming it's a lot. Because if the Spinosaurus can change from being a dinosaur with spines to a dinosaur with spines that likes swimming, who knows? Maybe the T-Rex was actually 2 feet tall and had giant arms. When you were told by a friend in 2nd grade that T-Rexes actually had feathers, where's the reason to doubt them? I mean, it sounds stupid, but I have no evidence that they didn't have feathers. I'm just a 2nd grader. Same thing with the fact that T-Rexes could be really any color, because while it makes sense that they would be brown or green or something for camouflage, T-Rexes are also the size of an apartment building. I don't think camouflage is going to go that far. They could be bright pink and yellow. No one knows. And it seems that the people who do know for a few years, and then they don't know, and it gets replaced by someone else who did know. And maybe they're orange and pink. My current theory is that T-Rexes were actually very bright pink, and they also had a fluffy, sort of sheep-like coat around them, which was also pink. And cotton candy, though no one will tell you this, is actually T-Rex fluff. And that's why it's so popular at movie theaters, because movie theaters sometimes show movies about the past. And so the T-Rexes would like to endorse that. Do you have any reason to doubt me? Yeah, lots, because that's a dumb thing to say with no evidence to back it up. But if I were someone more credible telling you that on a date that was not April 1st, you'd probably second guess your current thoughts on T-Rexes. My opinions on T-Rexes would definitely improve if they were actually made of cotton candy. But eating extinct animals is a sci-fi concept, is what I would have said a few weeks ago, because recently, scientists have actually created woolly mammoth meat, assuming by scanning one of those gross, dried-out raisin woolly mammoth mummies that have just been stuck in the ice, and bioengineering a weird meatball, which I'm assuming would not be sold in stores, because you can't exactly make a farm for an animal that doesn't exist. And people are making fun of dodo birds for being too friendly, or however they got extinct, and they all got eaten. Woolly mammoths have been extinct for like millions of years, and are still being eaten. That proves that they're more pathetic than dodo birds. Also, a question to those scientists, bioengineers, meatballers. Out of all the animals to pick, why a woolly mammoth? I know it was the easiest to do because of their preserved bodies, but like, choosing an animal famous for having a lot of hair as something that you eat sounds pretty disgusting. To go back to the topic of factually ambiguous statements, a similar thing could be observed when talking about those kind of home remedies / myths, where it's like, oh, you have a headache, just like swallow sugar or something. I'm not sure that's an actual thing, but you know what I'm talking about. A variation of that. And while I have no reason to believe you, I'm not exactly sure the science of how that would work, but, I mean, I'm open to try it. It's just swallowing sugar. Can't really die from that. Although, I guess, if the only reason for trying a thing is that, well, it won't kill you, I'm sure there are better remedies. A similar sort of myth like that is that being outside during cold weather makes you sick, or you'll catch a cold. And I've heard that before, but I've also heard, more recently, that it's not actually true, and that the actual reason that people get more sick during the winter is that viruses have an easier time surviving in cold weather. So, being cold makes you sick, it's not true, but it's also kind of is true. It's sort of confusing, because it's not the cold itself that makes you sick, it's just the cold that harbors the increased chance of making you sick. So, it's true, but not completely true. You should still wear a coat. The moral of these stories is that learning is good, and you should always keep learning, because no matter how much you learn, tomorrow there's more stuff to learn. Whether new things be discovered, or ancient mammals get turned into meatballs. Probably didn't see that coming, so it's always good to learn things. Recently, there have been shortages on helium. You know, that stuff that balloons are made of? And trust me, this is on topic. But there is a demand for helium. You know, all those clowns that need to fill up those balloons for the birthday party somehow. But with the way things are going, it currently looks like helium is most likely just going to be reserved for scientific experiments, because you really don't want one of the periodic tables going extinct from overuse, due to trivial things like birthday parties. So I predict in a few years, there'll be squeakeasies set up all across the United States, where people can have some balloon fun in peace. Sweet, sweet, illegal peace. That's a callback, that's a wrap-up, and it's been nearly stupid enough to have been Billy Nutjo's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Hello, welcome to Billy Nutjo's Rant, and it is very hot right now. I didn't know the sun could go up that high this time of year. I suppose it would be neighborly of me to advise you to wear lighter colored clothes in the sun, if you are worried about getting too hot, because lighter colors absorb less sunlight than darker colors. But with that being said, I should probably think of something to talk about. Oh yeah, here's something in Scratch news, which, if you're watching more recent episodes of the show to avoid things about Scratch, cover your ears for a few seconds, it'll only be a while. I've recently been playing around with Scratch add-ons. Yes, the Scratch add-ons. As in the browser extension that takes all the bad things about Scratch and fixes them, for the most part. And it's also the thing that invalidates 100 episodes worth of criticism. But it's okay, because now we have all this fun stuff, like a dark mode, for those who want to absorb more sunlight, while making Scratch projects. And it also has a few new doodads and sliders, like an opacity slider, for vector art, and probably bitmap too, but I don't care. Where, strangely enough, it doesn't work for a vector that you're creating right now, but if you click on one that you've already drawn, it works. I'm not sure why that is, but it is a feature that is supposedly in beta, which thankfully doesn't mean destroying everything by simply having it enabled. Oh yeah, and there's also the Echo sound editor effect, and it says that it restored the Echo sound editor effect, but I've never heard of the Echo sound editor effect before. So I think restored as in just made it a thing, So now I can go, Echo! Not only does Scratch add-ons help with actual Scratch stuff, it also even includes a full list of the emojis that are compatible with Scratch. Oh boy, let's take a look. In order, from top left to bottom right, we got incredibly poor quality Scratch Cat and Gobo, Stare Cat, Happy Cat, Cool Cat, Tongue Cat with one eye open, Laughing Crying Cat, Dead Cat, Staring Cat again, Hardy Cat, Starry Cat, Rainbow Cat, Pizza Cat, Party Popper Thing, Waffle, Taco, Sushi, Apple, Broccoli, Pizza, Corn on the cob, candy version, a map, a picture taker, a briefcase, a compass, binoculars, a muffin, pride flag, and the BLM thing, which I've already done an entire rant about, just when they came out. And I'm glad that they did add those extra two, because now it's an even 2 rows of however many there are. But then we've got the general use emojis, very specifically selected for optimum use during Scratch, such as clock, 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 keyboard, telephone, hourglass, weighing thing, cog, mail, scissors, tip of pen, umbrella, pencil, coffee, pawn, dead, vase, pickaxe, swords, hammers, chains, test tube of some sort, medical hat, star, lightning bolt, shooting star, sun is a star behind the cloud, lightning storm, snowman, ice, what are they called? Snowflakes, raining, 3-leaf clover, because you don't get one more leaf. And then, oddly enough, the only normal emoji face is a sad one, which is quite unusual. And then we got 2 fingers, 1 finger, drawing hand, palm hand, happy face, that's incredibly simplified for some reason, soccer ball, baseball, golf ball, man playing basketball, man skiing, ice skating shoe, plane, boat, an M for some reason, an anchor, a gas station, a fountain, a tent, a church, a mountain, a beach, a boat, an archway, an oven, all sorts of question marks and exclamation points, even though we can just type those normally, copyright, registered trademark, double exclamation point question mark, trademark, plus, minus, divided by, times, minus sign, I think that's a stop sign, no, it's not a stop sign, a yield sign, maybe, X's and O's, check mark, I have no idea what that is, bar graph going down, danger sign, and then we've got a whole bunch of remote control buttons, as well as some purple symbols. Some of those are astrology signs, and others are some other quite simple signs that you wouldn't be able to convey without emojis. Then we've got heart with dot, the suits, male symbol, female symbol, recycling symbol, nuclear bombs, biohazard, I don't know what those are, or that, death, boxes, circles, smaller boxes, even smaller boxes. What a great list. Oh boy, Jelly, that was a long one. My brain is fried after one vocal paragraph. There's no way I'm going to be able to get through this. And when I say a long one, that was a long one. In fact, that broke the world record for longest recorded single segment in a Billy Night Show episode, as that sound recording was a whopping 174 seconds long. Congratulations to me for breaking that world record. Bringing us to today's topic, world records. In recent world record news, the man with the world's longest tongue has achieved the fastest time to remove 5 Jenga blocks from a tower with his tongue. What record category this falls under? I honestly have no clue. It could be any. That is such a specific category. Plus, it's only limited to him, because you have to have the longest tongue in order to achieve this record. So at this point, is it even a world record? Or is it just a funny guy that this did with his incredibly long tongue? And I haven't seen the video, so I'm assuming that he didn't knock down the Jenga tower? Because if knocking it down is allowed, then I could easily become the first normal tongue-sized squirrel to knock over an entire Jenga tower with just his tongue. But the challenge comes from meeting the criteria, not necessarily actually doing the challenge. I'm not trying to say that most world records don't require skill, because if they're a world record where the entire world is competing against you, unless you have the longest tongue, in which case you have a distinct advantage, competing against the entire world is pretty difficult, no matter what the task is. While usually the point of world records is to show off a really big number, an impressive feat that someone has done, there are also a smaller category of world records that involve the least amount of things, which in some cases can be impossible to beat. For example, it's certainly a whole lot more feasible to break the record for most cupcakes eaten in a day, as opposed to the record for least cupcakes eaten in a day, which would just be 0, unless you could somehow figure out how to eat negative cupcakes. We do not currently have that technology. However, sometimes technology does play a part in the world record. For example, speedrunning can be seen as a type of world record, because that's literally what it is, a competition to see who can complete a video game the fastest. Which means, theoretically, if someone pulls off a perfect run, then that speedrunning category would be dead, and no one else would be allowed to take that record. And that person would forever be immortalized in first place. Although, running out of speedrun categories is not really a concern for right now, as you can just take any word, put a percent after it, and boom, we gotta run. Records come in all shapes and sizes, some more feasible than others to complete by yourself, some requiring friends, some requiring thousands of friends, some requiring millions of friends, or heck, even entire countries, which would be incredibly difficult to arrange. And then there are also those records that involve entire families, as in generations and generations of families. Like, I don't know, longest held family heirloom? That's probably a world record somewhere. And on the more morbid side, there are records that require the death of the person who got the record. Like, for example, most cupcakes eaten in a day. Don't worry, that was just a joke. No one actually died eating cupcakes that I'm aware of. It's fine. But, Jelly, you are not looking fine over there. Do you want to go to bed? It doesn't seem like you're really built for the heat. Okay, good night. See you tomorrow. Now, world records. Let's see here.
Yo, what's up, squirrel?
Tenerbot, my plastic nemesis, what are you doing here?
I heard that you were talking about world records. Thought I'd award you one of your own.
Oh yeah, it sounds like a good thing until you realize it's coming from Tenerbot.
No. I'm being real here. You have officially been awarded by the Tenerbot Record Association the world record for worst show to come out in the year 2020.
Yeah, world record!
Hey Jill, I just did the most amazing thing this week. So do you remember how it was my New Year's resolution to become a better superhero? Well, I figured the most easy way to become a hero is to save someone else's life. However, I am ill-equipped to save other people's lives because of my current town reputation and random explosion habits. So what I decided is, if I can't save someone's life, I should save their life. But with, magic powers. So I've decided to try to find a way to revive someone from the dead, technically saving a life, and would absolutely improve my town reputation. How am I going to do that? Well, it's simple. I found this. Take a look at this. Isn't it awesome? I found it in some old pointy thing in Africa. I have no idea who would just leave it unguarded like that. It was super easy to just take it. And I came to you because I knew that you were the only person who would appreciate what I'm about to do. Surely you know it's for the greater good. Alright, hey, look at it this way. See all those lights across the river? Each one of those lights is someone's house, and in those houses live people. Imagine those people dead, and now imagine them revived because of us. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Alright, now you're just wasting valuable life-saving time. This isn't a difficult decision, just give me a yes or no. I will be willing to take full responsibility for this, as long as you take half. Now, I know that may not have been the most optimal way to use the artifact, but hey, it hit somewhere, and there was a big blue flash, which obviously means something happened. So if we just find where it happened, we can figure out where to go from there. And see that giant blue pulsating smoking crater over there? I think that would be a good place to start looking. Wow. Oh, hello there. I like your hat. It's very cool. Thank you, kind civilian of the future. Now, do you happen to know a place where I can catch up on what's happened in the last, let's just say, 4,000 years? Oh yeah, information's super easy to get. You just have to go on the, internet. The what? Oh, the internet. You know, the place that's not really a place that you can go to find information of variable credibility. And also watch cartoons sometimes. I'm sorry there, buddy, but I don't know what an internet is, and I don't have the time to go walk over to one. So, is there a more traditional way of finding out information? Well, you could always go to a school, although be warned, it may take a decade to get through all the material, and the repeating stuff, and the history, and the local history, and the, settling and immigration and farming and stuff. But eventually you'll get to what you want. So you're saying there ain't a more efficient way to get through all that stuff? Well, we are standing in front of a library. I I deeply apologize for my exasperated response. I did not think that you guys would still have libraries. Okay, glad I could help. Have fun with your research and whatnot. I'm just gonna keep loitering. Alright then, you have fun with that. Alright, this is what I've been telling you. We would be there by now if you would just grab my hand and I'd fly there. It'd take half a second. Maybe even less. Sure, you may not survive, but it's still worth a chance. We get there really quick. Statistically, maybe like an 80% chance you die, but that's on a test. That would be passing comfortably. And I never pass anything, so you're in good hands. Well, if that doesn't convince you, I suppose we could just walk like animals and get there in an incredibly inefficient 5 minutes. Alright, fine. I'll entertain your little game. We can walk like a parade. A parade down the street, when we could just be flying like a plane. A plane parade. An air show. Air shows are so much cooler than parades, Jill. Walking is probably one of my least favorite things that I have to do in order to fit in with everyone else. Why walk? I can fly. It is incredibly fast, and also incredibly cool. Plus, these legs weren't made for walking. They were made for flying, which is to say they weren't made with much thought in mind at all. Alright, I may be careless, but I'm not reckless. For your own safety, I'm going to have to ask that you stay right out here, because this zombie could be dangerous. And although I've been doing most of the brain work, I'd still like you to have yours. Alright then, I have extracted from this place all the history that has happened since I have been dead. Time to catch up on what's been happening in the world of, stuff. Oh yeah, this is some good stuff. Lots of words and oh hey, what's that thing that looks way more interesting? Wowee. This is one fine piece of technology. I assume it's some sort of future librarian. I wouldn't want to wake him up, so it's best to be quiet, and at the very least stop saying what I'm thinking out loud, because no one's listening. Wow, look at that, 1993. Wow, this really is the future. Alright, I'll be seeing you now. Next time you see me, I will be well adjusted to your culture, so as to be more friendly with you. Until then, you just wait here at the table. I've learned some very important information on the case. I just talked to the night guard, and he said that there was a giant gaping hole in the floor. The kind of giant gaping hole that only the most horrific of zombies would come out of. He didn't actually say that, I just added it, for dramatic effect. It seems the zombie has also raided the costume closet, and has stolen a wedding dress. Which apparently is also pretty big news, because they only have one wedding dress, and tomorrow they're doing some sort of lovey-dovey play about gross stuff. So we're absolutely going to have to retrieve that. I can't believe zombies have existed for 5 minutes and they're already destroying our culture. Not that I cared much. But that's not the most important piece of information. When the night guard stuck his head outside to see if he could see anyone leaving or coming into the building, he saw someone in a wedding dress walking right into the library across the street. Now we know where the zombie is. But the night guard was too scared to investigate. Said he'd just call the cops until I showed up. But I'm above the cops, Jill. I'm a superhero. And every superhero needs a good zombie fight. Come on, no time for dawdling. We can look both ways before crossing the street twice as fast with 2 people. I just realized this is the last night people won't like me. I'll be a world-renowned hero after saving the world from one wedding dress-wearing zombie. Come, my lady, we have ghouls to bust. Area check. Quick, look left and right. We gotta be thorough and quick with this. You! Yes, I got it! Jill, get over here. I've got myself an actual factual zombie. Ew, it's warm. Excuse me, sir, I don't appreciate being thrown into the floor. Yeah, sure. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if you wouldn't mind. Alright, Sheriff. Go ahead. What were you doing in this building? Oh, I was just reading a book. Okay, I'd just like to analyze that result with my, deputy. Reading a book, huh? What do you think? Sounds pretty suspicious. Only someone truly evil would do that. We've reviewed your testimony and have concluded it doesn't make sense. What would a zombie be reading a book for? No, you must not understand. I'm reading these books so I can understand what happened in the time I left and the time I returned. I wouldn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. That would not be a good first impression. So far, I'm thinking your present is way better than mine. For example, did you know that women now have rights? Isn't that amazing? No! This is not at all what I was expecting. Why aren't you eating people's brains? What? Is that why you say hello or something? Oh yeah, and also you're gonna have to return that dress to the theater. Oh, alright, okay, just give me a second to... Hey, what are you doing? You can't take your clothes off here? Gross. But neither of you are wearing any... What's your name? Amanda? I can't believe this, Jill. We resurrected a pacifist, friendly zombie named Amanda. That's absurd. No one's gonna think I'm a hero for resurrecting a normal person. It would have been way better to save the world from a zombie invasion. Actually, it's not Amanda. It's Emanda, with an E. Yeah, sorry about that. I've never really been one for caring about the correct names for people. Well, I suppose that just makes you a big jerk. Hey, you respect your parents. What? We gave her life. That basically makes us her parents. And seeing as no one seems to want me here anymore, I'm just gonna go and retrieve a cat from a tree or something. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I really can't say I'm a fan of whoever that was, but you seem nice. Alright then, bye-bye. I'd like to see you later sometime. Good meeting you. Have a good night. Well, if they don't need this back, I'm definitely going to be keeping it. I look amazing.
Hello, welcome to Billionaire Joe's Rant. Are you good there, Jelly? You look a little fatigued. You okay? Okay, good. Which is not necessarily the most non-redundant option I could have chosen for that dialogue, as I just said good not but 5 seconds ago. So in that case, great. I have an idea. Let's use tonight's performance as sort of a makeup episode. And not makeup in the cosmetic sense, or makeup in the accounting for something that was not their sense, but rather making up in the apology sense, though not so much an apology as a correction. For example, not too long ago, I was talking about the lightsaber from Doom, the Crucible, and how the laser part of the sword was sticking through the handle, and how that was kind of a ridiculous design, because you would just cut off your own fingers trying to hold the thing. I think I may have figured out why it was sticking through the handle in that particular image. And it all goes back to a character called the Marauder. And you don't need to know anything about this guy, except for the fact that he marauds, I guess, and in his marauding escapades, he carries a lightsaber axe, almost identical in design to the Crucible. And the Marauder also has these big stupid horns on top of his head, and he does a lot of overhead swings, which makes you very liable for cutting off your own horns. So what's the solution for the Marauder? Well, his axe actually magically extends, and the blade contorts so that it does not cut off his own horns when he swings it overhead, which I noticed, and I thought that was a pretty cool design. So maybe the Crucible does the same thing, where it has sort of anti-self-harm technology. And the reason why that wasn't active during that image was because it wasn't being held by a person. It was being held by a robot. And maybe the Crucible can't discern robot hand from person hand, and so it doesn't activate that sort of defense mechanism. If my theory is correct, then this would also explain why the Slayer himself does not use the Marauder's axe after he kills him. It's absolutely not out of respect for the dead, because I doubt the Doomslayer has much respect for this guy who just goes around marauding, or whatever. Because maybe the axe only works for demons, just like the Crucible only works for people. Its defense mechanisms would not work, and you'd be more liable for injury. The best part about this theory is that it's absolutely unarguable. It's a perfect theory. Assuming you ignore that one execution where the Doomslayer takes the Marauder's axe and cuts his head off with it, it's an unarguable theory. And as much as I would like to keep ruining my own dumb theories with obvious evidence against them, let's continue on. Now let's just say, theohypothetically, I had more than one example. And I didn't just theme this entire episode around making up for things that I had mistakes on that I can only think of one mistake. Theohypothetically is a portmanteau of theoretically and hypothetically, in case you didn't know. So I guess I'm going to have to come up with some other random thing to talk about. How about, Pythagorean theorem? Man, how much of a square do you have to be for your first random thought to be Pythagorean theorem? The answer, you don't have to be a square. You have to be a triangle, because Pythagorean theorem is how you calculate the sides of a triangle. I know if you're watching this, you most likely hate math, but stay with me. The Pythagorean theorem states a squared plus b squared is c squared. A and b of a triangle are the sides that are not the hypotenuse. What the heck is a hypotenuse? It's not a combination hippo and moose. It's actually just the side that's across from the right angle, as you can tell by that conveniently pointed arrow. The reason I'm bringing this up is actually for something very cool. Video games. Specifically, video games made by people who are cool enough to not care about the Pythagorean theorem. Because if you've noticed, sometimes in video games, moving diagonally is faster than moving in the cardinal directions. Why is that? Well, whoever the heck Pythagorean is, has the answer. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Let's say for this example, that square in the corner, the right angle square, is the Doomslayer. Because in Doom, moving diagonally is faster than moving in the cardinal directions. In this example, if the Slayer moves in the cardinal directions, that's at a speed of 20. 20 what? I don't know what the unit of measurement in Doom is. I think it's like map units or something. It's not real. So if the Slayer moves up, he moves at a speed of 20. If the Slayer moves right, he moves at a speed of 20. However, what if the Slayer were to move diagonally from that point? If you're cool enough to not know what a square is, to square a number means to multiply it by itself. Pretty self-explanatory. So 20 times 20 is 400. So moving up is 400, moving right is 400. However, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So 400 plus 400, that's 800. And in order to find the square of c, you would have to square root 800, because square root is the opposite of square. And we are moving across the equal sign, which means we gotta do some flipping. Square rooting the sum of 20 squared plus 20 squared, which is 800, gives us an astounding 28, which means moving diagonally puts you at a speed of 28 instead of the traditional 20. That's a pretty substantial speed increase. For our non-algebraically inclined friends, you can also pretty easily figure this out by starting from the Slayer's position and either walking up or right until you reach the end of the triangle. Doing that would take longer than just walking diagonally. Because of course it would. We just proved that. With dumb numbers. What's the moral of the story? Well, if you ever find yourself making a video game, don't do some code workaround to delete the Pythagorean theorem. That's lame. Keep it in. It makes you move faster. That's cool. If you are still watching by this point, thank you. You're amazing. I hope I didn't trigger any traumatic memories of math class if you've already learned this. And if you haven't already learned this, be sure to tell your teacher that you first learned it from a cartoon squirrel. I'm sure that'll go down well. And I don't mean to get you too excited, but before you go outside and try Doom running, I unfortunately have to report I've already tried it, and no, it doesn't work. The Slayer must have some anti-Pythagorean running shoes. Because unfortunately, real-life physics does not allow diagonal fast running to be possible. Want to argue against my disappointment and say, well, yeah, it's just a video game. The Slayer can also double jump. That doesn't mean it's possible in real life. I would retort, as a huge nerd, well, actually, Doom takes place in the future. Maybe in the future, Pythagorean theorem will be possible to run along. And also, the Slayer wears something called Delta 5 jump boots, which allows him to double jump. How does that work? I have no idea. That's future technology. Although nothing in the name Delta 5 jump boots specifies that it would allow you to run faster diagonally. But by that point in history, chronologically, the Slayer would have lost the power, because in the more recent Doom games, the people who made the game must have learned about Pythagorean theorem, because it's no longer possible to run faster diagonally. So this whole thing, canonically, the Slayer was never able to run fast diagonally. That was just a technical error. Yet again, I am disappointed. The true lesson to be learned from this experience: never trust right triangles. They may be right, but that doesn't mean they're correct. This has been Billy Nacho's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Also, apparently, it's not Delta 5 jump boots. It's actually Delta V jump boots. I thought the big V was a Roman numeral 5, but apparently it's just a V. So pretend every time I said 5, I just said V. Plus, Delta 5 jump boots just sounds cooler. Hey, it just occurred to me, I may be slightly, just a little bit, a bit of a hippogriff. Because literally yesterday, I was talking about how cool math was, and how fast it makes you go. Or something like that, I don't remember. And today, I'm here to talk about the exact opposite of liking math. Being forced to do math is never fun. If I want to do math in my free time to calculate the trajectory of a fictional character while running sideways, that's my own business. And I feel that that's fun to do. But being forced to do math is, for the most part, for the always part, unless it's just a specific kind of math that you really like doing, it's almost never fun. Enter standardized testing. What standard is standardized testing held to? I assume a pretty low one. It wouldn't be very fair if the people who were taking the test were held in very high standards, because how's a third-party resource supposed to know what that specific school got through in the curriculum? Obviously, I'm not intelligent enough to comprehend whatever witchcraft they use. But the point of standardized test isn't really so much to test the school as it is to test the students. And it seems that even the companies behind these tests know about it, because most often they'll include guides on how to de-stress on the day of the test. A rhyme that I just made up right now and has probably been used by someone, rather hypogryphically. These mysterious test people are aware of the fact that they're putting extra stress onto these students who are already going through the very stressful activity of going to school. And what do they do about it? They say, eat some breakfast and try your best, which I guess it works, but it just comes across as sarcastic. In my experience, there are various kinds of standardized tests from all sorts of subjects. Mainly the main four: history, English, math, and science. Science and history being the lesser pushed ones, which are usually just like every once in a while. It's usually a surprise when that's one of the main subjects that they have on the test. Because those both require lots of physical grading, because I definitely don't trust a robot to do that. However, ironically, English, being the one that probably requires the most physical labor, is the one that's pushed almost as much as math, but not quite as much, because math is just that much easier for the test providers. They don't have to put their grading team, who are all chained up in the basement of the building, to work as nearly as hard as during the essay portions, because multiple choice quite literally answers itself. I suppose it could be considered a good deed to make your open response essays somewhat entertaining to read, so as to entertain those chained up graders as they endlessly cycle through paragraph and paragraph of whatever random crap the test providers could find. Write an essay about how pollution is bad, or recycling is good, or how farming is good. There's always a stupid green thumb paragraph on there, as if to apologize for the trees needed to be killed to make those accursed bubble sheets. Thankfully, they're not nearly as much in use because of the technology of computers and digitized tests. But of course, who would trust handy-dandy computers that can grade things for you when you could manually slip in these stupid bubble sheets into whatever horrifying contraption grades them according to the darkness of the bubbles? Bonus points if the slip itself contains examples of how not to fill in a bubble, including the worst penmanship you've seen out of someone higher than 3rd grade. Is it not a bit primitive to invalidate someone's answer because they didn't color in a circle to your liking? Wouldn't it make sense to just click on the box? And don't even get me started on where they make you sign your name on those things, where they have every letter of the alphabet all signed out in bubbles. So there's like 150 bubbles or something, and you just have to fill in your name one letter at a time. What a waste of paper. My technology teacher isn't Ada Lovelace. What is this prehistoric garbage? One of my very first memorable experiences of having, quote, butterflies in the stomach was during one of these tests. So I guess the test got what it wanted. I remembered something. Isn't that what school's all about? Remembering things? School should have a lot more trauma. Then it'd be a lot more memorable. As I continue to get more in-depth on these tests, I'd like to remind you that discussing these tests and their answers is technically not legal. Meaning I need to choose my words very carefully. As carefully as everyone who finishes the test 5 minutes after immediately starts talking about how much they hate it right in front of the teacher. Because does the teacher care? No. Teachers are cool. They're not part of the evil testing system. They have their own evil tests that they sprinkle in sporadically. One last quick word on the English section before we move on to the abysmal math section is that because of that strict confidentiality and how you are not allowed to retain anything directly from the test after it's done, you have your memory erased with some magic device or something. If I found a passage in the English part that I thought, this is some pretty good stolen literature from another, more complete version, I might be interested in reading this. Nope, I can't, because I don't remember the title, because I'm not allowed to share it. Now on to math. As a person who occasionally enjoys some math here and there, I can say math sucks, and it's occasionally very difficult. And it seems that these test people knew what they were doing, because they thought, hey, it's challenging. That means we need some accessibility options, so that people of all learning abilities can benefit off of our garbage, including, but not limited to, a line reader tool, so you can more accurately examine their bloated word problems, filled with so many filler, garbage, and just overall not needed information to complete the problem, that I'd say, yeah, it makes sense that they'd have a line reader. A little less sense is the astounding, tiny magnifying glass tool, which produces a box that very slightly magnifies things, maybe like 0.25% magnification. I know the keyboard shortcut for the magnifier. This isn't needed. And then there's also the epic cross-out option tool, which allows you to cross out a multiple choice option. Not that you'd be spending much time on a multiple choice question, because of those darn word problems. But those truly epic features are only available on online versions of the test. If you're doing that sort of test in real life, you won't have those luxuries. I say luxury with such heavy air quotes that I'm not even going to try to lift them. But hey, if you're doing the test in real life, you'll get a handy-dandy reference sheet containing geometry formulas while you're on the algebra section. Thanks a lot, jerks. And of course they don't let you use a calculator on the algebra section, because why would you? They care so much about accessibility with all these epic online features. You know what would make things pretty accessible? Being able to use a calculator, so we don't have to waste 30 minutes doing long division. And please stop asking for the square root of 3. It's 1.7 something. And it's not really possible to do without a calculator. Have some mercy. But who knows? Maybe it's just this area's standardized tests that are bad. Jelly, have you ever taken a test in another country? Yeah, me neither. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that they probably suck too, just in the hopes that we're all in the same boat. My final point today will be made now, because I can't take much more about talking such a miserable subject. Anyone watching this not in the United States may have been blessed with not knowing about the following. However, I'll try to explain. The final boss of standardized testing in the United States is called the SAT. What does that stand for? I wish I could tell you, because apparently, since the year 2012, it has not stood for anything. It's quite literally a pointless, void acronym that means nothing. So I guess it's supposed to be pronounced SAT, not SAT. Although I've never heard anyone say SAT. They always say SAT. Maybe they're stuck in the year 2011, or maybe it's just really stupid that they don't have an acronym for their very obvious acronym. This has been Billy Nut Joe's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. And if you just so happen to be watching this near the time when you're supposed to take one of these tests, just please, for your own sake, do your best. Maybe the locked up basement council will have mercy on you and decide that you are worthy. To quote that one guy we learned about in history class, good night and good luck. Edward R. Murrow. What does the R stand for? Nothing. Why do you ask? Every year, 100 years ago seems a lot less than it was when you first heard about 100 years ago. Because when a person first hears about 100 years ago, and they are not yet educated on what 100 years ago was, they probably think, whoa, like dinosaurs, and cavemen, and the hokey pokey. But no, 100 years ago was not actually that long ago. And even less long ago, pretty interesting things started to happen. But because before that, there was just like industrialization, and that's pretty boring. Today, I thought it would be interesting to talk about the Hoover Dam. A dam that was built a long time ago, nearly 100 years ago. I think about 90 years ago, which may seem like a long time ago, and that's because it was. And the Hoover Dam's a pretty impressive thing. It's very big. And it was built only 9 PG, post-Gatsby. So they didn't have much technology to work with. The dam itself was named after then-President Herbert Hoover. He was one of the presidents during the Great Depression, and he was famous for his policies involving something called, I think, like rugged individualism, which seemed like a good idea. Is basically saying, the government shouldn't control what you do. We should all use, like, teamwork to get the job done. Which sounds nice, but it was the Great Depression, and no one had any money for teamwork to work. Really, I don't blame the guy. If I were the president, that's a big responsibility. I also wouldn't really want to do my job. And so if you can make a policy that helps make your job easier, sure. Just make sure it actually works. He was not very popular at the time with the public. In fact, people often called poor towns Hoovervilles. How very flattering. I'm sure if Herbert had known about this and had a time machine, he would have gone forward in time to after the Great Depression, and then redeemed his presidential receipt. Probably would have went better for him. But I have no right to speak about presidency. I'm here to talk about giant slabs of concrete. Not only was the Hoover Dam very big, but it was also being built 90 years in the past, so they didn't all have all sorts of fancy laser drills and giant bombs to blow away the rock and stuff. Plus, they were building a dam, and a dam involves a lot of water to keep the hydroelectric power and stuff. Because if there was no water, you wouldn't be building a dam, you would just be building a wall. And sure, you could call the wall a dam wall, but if there's no water running through it, then it's not a dam wall, it's just a normal wall. The water and the concrete together form the dam, otherwise it's just a plain old wall. And nothing's impressive about just building a big wall, because there's not as much worries about water and heat and pressure and bombs. We're going to be talking a lot about bombs, I think. In order to have ample room for the dam to fit into the actual river part of the river, there needed to be a bit of terraforming to be done. Terraforming how? Terraforming with explosives. The funnest kind. And by the funnest kind, I mean not fun. Not fun in the slightest. Because unfortunately, real life is not like Minecraft, where an explosive will take out a huge chunk of area. No, in real life, an explosive might take off a few inches, but it'll also fill the air with poisonous dust, that if you breathe in too much you will die. And lots of people died trying to dig up the Hoover Dam. Very sad. I'm not afraid to admit it, but I myself am inept at building dams, really. I suck at building dams. I couldn't block off a stream. I'm no beaver, and I'm certainly not nutty. However, lucky for the workers, they did have a beaver on the Herbert Hoover Dam building project, and his name was Frank Crow. Crow spelled with an E, because this is America. This guy, Frank Crow, made massive money building dams for the government. He was a whiz at building dams. They called him the Dam Wizard. He was so good at building dams, they'd never let him near the drinking fountains, because he just never let anyone else drink from him. He's probably the only person in history strong enough to single-handedly defeat the Colorado River, as long as in those hands were blueprint and a pencil. But Mr. Crow wasn't worried about the Colorado River. He was worried about the Herbert Dam. And he was on a tight budget, too. A tight budget of multi-million dollars, but still, that's a tight budget. I suppose. I'll have to take his word for it. After a whole bunch of brave construction dudes risked their lives to get this giant hole dug, it was done. And now all that was left was to, build the dam. The final piece of the puzzle. The one-piece puzzle. There's really only one piece. They just had to make a table to fit that piece. So how was the dam built? Well, take out your very own blueprint and pencil, because I'm going to tell you, in a completely 100% accurate way. Step 1. Build a giant metal frame, a skeleton, if you will, for your dam to take shape. Step 2. Pour a whole lot of concrete into it to make a solid thing. Step 3. Wait for it to dry. Step 3. Wait for it to dry. Step 3. Wait for it to... This is not going to work, is it? Frank Crow definitely saw a problem with this, because you see, concrete can take a long time to harden. The more concrete there is, the longer time it takes to harden. And a giant concrete structure the size of a skyscraper might take a little bit of time. In fact, it could have probably taken years to fully dry, let alone be functional as a dam. And Frank saw this problem, and he said, You know what? Let's give this dam a circulatory system. You might be thinking I'm joking. In fact, I thought I was joking. But no, I wasn't. He actually made a bunch of small metal pipes that contained super cold water that ran through the concrete structure on the inside to help the inside cool quicker, which superspeeded the cooling process, and the dam was built within the next millennium. Truly inspirational. In fact, you could say he really put his heart into this project, and since the veins were embedded deep into the concrete, they're still there to this very day. Spooky. And maybe, in the future, when the dam is no longer operational, water companies will have a field day, siphoning out all that decades-old water to sell as super premium, cold, Schuber dam water. Anything's possible in the future. History is all about learning things. And if there's one thing to be learned from this story, if you ever find yourself facing a difficult thing that you have to do, or a really challenging project, just remind yourself, at least I'm not Frank Crow, creator of the world's coolest brick. This has been Billy Nacho's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. But before it's over, I'd like to leave with a quote from Herbert Hoover. I don't know any quotes from Herbert Hoover. Hello, welcome to Billy Nacho's Rant, and today we're going to be talking about sound. Did I just sound a little muffled there? Sorry about that. Hello, welcome to Billy Nacho's Rant, and today we're going to be talking about sound. I use the power of muffling on purpose to show my vast knowledge of sound, which really, it stretches from knowing how to make sound to knowing how to form words, and that's about it. Not too long ago, I discussed the built-in songs in the Scratch sound editor, which was apparently not stupid enough to not receive a sequel, so today, let's do the same thing, but with just sound effects. And I'm not going to be covering every single sound effect, because there are a lot of them, and a lot of them are boring. Here are some examples of boring sound effects. See, wasn't that incredibly boring? Alright, maybe not that last one, but for the most part, those sound effects were boring, everyday sound effects that you'd probably hear every day, hence the title. But I'm not here to talk about those sound effects. I'm here to talk about interesting sound effects. Now there's a sound effect worth talking about. That one is specifically called crunch. What is being crunched is very difficult to tell, because to me, it just sounds like a computer sound, but apparently it's something being crunched. Perhaps it's a computer crunching numbers, and that's the sound it makes, but honestly, I don't think real things make a sound like that. So how was it recorded? Let's theorize a little. Perhaps it's someone making that sound with their mouth, like or grrr, or maybe something like but the current evidence provided does not support that theory, as there's already a sound effect that you've heard called chomp, you know, the one that goes gomp. So crunch and chomp shouldn't exist in the same library of sound, because that would be redundant, right? Well, this is not the only instance in a redundant sound in the Scratch sound library, as there is also the inexplicable Alien Creek sounds, in which Alien Creek 2 displays an alien creak. Here, listen. Yeah, that sounds like the creaking of an alien, I suppose. But Alien Creek 1 is an anomaly, because Alien Creek 1 almost sounds like it's being played in reverse, and whoever uploaded the sound accidentally reversed it before putting it in the official library, and nobody's noticed. Here's a comparison. Forward, backward. Forward, backward. Forward, backward. For Alien Creek 2, it's a lot more obvious that the backward version is incorrect, as it does that thing that backward things do, where it starts low and then gets high. But not Alien Creek 1, quite suspicious. I'll leave everyone to interpret their own ideas on whether Alien Creek 1 is meant to be played forward or backward. But for now, let's move on to an probably even worsely technical done sound called Buzz Whiz. Sounds like a cola brand. Notice how abruptly it cuts off at the end? That clearly means that someone pressed the stop recording button too soon before the sound was being finished playing. This one also sounds better in reverse, but that's probably just because it was recorded poorly, and not because it's some secret encoded backwards hidden message. Ooh! I don't really have much to say on this one, it's just a very relaxing sound. I don't know why a pirate ship bell is a relaxing sound, but it just is. There's one thing that would make it better though. A little bit of echo. Because usually when you hear these bells, it's not just one and done, it's a dong 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 sort of ordeal. So just as a quick break. This one's a bit unusual because it's called space noise. and everyone knows that sound doesn't work in space. So let's hear the space noise. Alright, I guess what it's going for is sort of a spaceship, like boiler room sort of hum. But I think space requires something a little more, como se dice, transcendent. Alright, I guess that's pretty cool. But not as cool as my favorite of the space-themed sound effects, which for some reason get an entire section to themselves in the sound library, because they're just that good, I guess. Boom cloud. It'll be difficult to top boom cloud, so I simply won't try. Because next up on my list of sound effects I want to talk about are the scream sound effects. How good are these screams? Not very. Here's scream number 1. Ah! To me that seemed pretty disingenuous. I mean, ah! Is not exactly what I would call terrified, but that little peep is nothing compared to the absolute detriment to scratch culture that Scream 2 introduced. Here's the sound effect. If you've ever been on Scratch, you've probably heard of it. Ah! Yeah, Scream 2. The Scream 2. The Hua! The Ying Hua! To Ah's Yang. The polar opposite. While Yeah is relatively harmless in the grand scheme of things, Hua was a step back in evolution. It is, without a doubt, the most annoying sound effect I've ever heard. And of course, since it's the one that sounds the least professional, the least like it would come out in an official Scratch sound library, a status held only for the best of sound effects, it's the most popular out of all the wacky sound effects. It has all the sternum-crushing power of Boom Cloud, with none of the coolness. But although the sound effect is quite wacky, it is not under the appropriately titled Wacky section of the Scratch sound library. No, it is under the Voice section, because I guess it was made with a voice. But Beatbox is under the Loop section, and not the Voice section, because I guess it's a sound loop and also a voice sound. But whatever. There are lots of other sound effects in the voice category, including this one. Sounds like it was recorded in the shower. Listen to that at the very start. It sounds like pittering rain, or in this case, a shower head. I could go on, but in the classical style of Billy Nut Joe, I'm gonna finish before I finish saying everything I want to say, so that maybe later I can revisit it. This has been Billy Nut Joe's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed. Keep your whoas at home. One of the oldest debates in history is, which is better, the movie or the book? This has been around since movies were invented, at about 130 BC, before computers. Because for a period, movies were made entirely with practical effects. But that's beyond the scope of this conversation. So, really, what is better, the book or the movie? Before getting knee-deep into this subject, let's first discuss a much easier question. Which is better, the video game or the movie? Generally, if it was made before the year 2010, it probably sucks. That's generally because older video game movies tend to not be a good adaptation of the source material. Like, hey, it's Total Recall, but with the Mario Brothers, I guess. That's also a very important part when talking about book and movie adaptations, is how well it does adapt. And as time goes on, just like real adaptation in the wild, things adapt more gooder. It's also worth noting that video games that have been adapted into movies, about 20 years ago, usually weren't adapted from games that had a very good story. Like really, if you were to make a Mario movie 20 years ago, what would it be about? Probably not what the actual Mario movie from over 20 years ago was about. But it most likely wouldn't be just stomping on turtles and climbing flagpoles. However, now, video game movie standards are much higher, because now video games have the technology to tell stories, of which books have always had that technology, so let's finally move on to the actual subject. But wait, no, one quick mini rant. And I know I say that I'd stop talking about Doom, but listen, when we talk about old video game movies, there are really two to bring up, Mario and Doom. And much like Mario, Doom does not have a very advanced story. Space base, space guys, demons. That's about it. So how did the Doom movie do it? I'd say pretty well. And even if the Doom movie was based off of Doom 3, which had what could be called a story, but it was mostly just the same thing. Space, demons, space base, on Mars. But except, Doom 3 and the Doom movie have a lot more bald people, which really sets it apart from its 1993 counterpart. Anyway, books, First, let's look at each side of the argument. People who say the books are better usually say that the directors misinterpret the themes of the book, while bring them over to the movie, and leave out very important scenes. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes it leaves out scenes in the book that are just like exposition, because exposition in movies can be done with montages and not pages of text. A book enjoyer may also say that with a book, you get a whole lot more nuance than you do a movie. And again, that's just a variable. So it really depends. And I'm not making up arguments here, because saying that a movie misinterprets the book is a very valid argument for the Lorax. You've probably seen the 3D animated Lorax movie, and though it is entertaining and pretty fun, it a little bit misses the point. Compare that with the older 2D animated Lorax movie, which I'm pretty sure was made with Dr. Seuss actually on board, and it's a pretty drastic difference, because the 2D animated movie is pretty much just the book, but a cartoon, with a few musical numbers. And while yes, that is a great adaptation, because it's pretty much the exact same thing, could it be said that maybe a movie adaptation of a book should go for a different thing, with a similar vibe and characters and aesthetics and stuff? Possibly, but I don't want to reach a conclusion at the start of my argument, so let's move on to the perspective of movie enjoyers. Someone who says that movies are better than books is usually someone who doesn't like to read, which I can understand. Reading can be boring, and with a movie, what you see is what you get. And while yes, there may be underlying messages, unlike a book, it is not nearly as important to understand them in order to fully enjoy the movie. Okay, maybe that's stupid. Yes, it's important to understand the movie that you're watching, but with a book, if your eyes get drifty and you start like skimming pages instead of actually reading, you're gonna miss a lot more than if you just watch a movie and miss like a bit of foreshadowing or something. I don't want to go on much longer just giving generalizations and referencing a few movies that I saw a long time ago and barely remember. So let's focus. The Great Gatsby. Question 1. What is The Great Gatsby? Well, it's an incredibly popular book that wasn't popular at the time it was written. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the author died thinking that he was a failure, which is quite sad, but luckily, his book lives on as a great piece of literature, and I'm sure a lot of students who even don't like to read can appreciate the book for being very short. Question 2. When was this book written? Is it some like Shakespeare crap that's 100 years old? The answer is, yeah, it is 100 years old. Reading the book is really something like this. Oh wow, that's so sad. Wait, what does libertine mean? It's so sad. Jelly, do you know what The Great Gatsby is about? Alright, that's okay. I can explain it without spoiling anything. So pretty much, the book is a recalling of someone called Nick about his really rich neighbor named Gatsby. And everyone's really curious as to where he got all his money, because he's always throwing crazy parties and stuff. And that's pretty much the majority of the book's story. Now, if I was absolutely forced to adapt any book into a movie, I'd probably pick The Great Gatsby. Because although it presents itself as high class, and very smart, and somewhat pretentious, while the characters in the book are very smart and somewhat pretentious, the actual themes of the story are pretty simple when you look at it. Because although the book is somewhat a mystery, as it unfolds all the details very slowly, but by the end, every single metaphor in the book is completely explained, and all the character motivations too, mostly. And that's why I think adapting it into a movie would be pretty easy. Because usually metaphors are difficult to write into a movie, because in a book, you can just imply things through writing, but with a movie, you have to show that. Which I guess also makes it easy to explain metaphors in a book, which this book does a lot. Very useful for writing papers on it in English class, but not so much for adapting it into a movie. Wait, did I just say it was easy to make into a movie, and then I said it was difficult to make into a movie? What am I saying? Let me collect my thoughts. The most recent adaptation of The Great Gatsby was in the year 2013, which already was 10 years ago. Wow. And it was by famous director Baz Luhrmann, an Australian best known for turning Romeo and Juliet's first scene into a gas station shootout, which is substantially cooler than Romeo and Juliet's actual first scene. And much like in Romeo and Juliet, The Great Gatsby is elevated to a level of absurdity that's slightly higher than the book, because the book is already pretty darn absurd, but the movie is just a bit more absurd, and more absurd equals more fun, so naturally you'd think that the movie would be better. The only flaw, in my opinion, of The Great Gatsby movie, as compared to the book, is a flaw that a lot of movie adaptations of other media falls into, and that's giving one character way too much screen time. Like, I know the movie's called The Great Gatsby, and he's apparently so great, but the movie really is just about Gatsby. Most of the other characters do not get nearly as much time in the spotlight as they do in the book, which is ironic, because the book is written in first person, so naturally you'd think that it would be only the main character whose thoughts we get to hear. But no, apparently Nick has some telepathic mind powers, and the book ends up having a lot more character diversity than the movie, which is fine, because Gatsby in the movie is pretty cool. To give actual examples of movies I've already talked about, the Lorax gives way too much screen time to the Onceler. He's not even the title character. The Lorax himself, while he does do stuff, he's not the center of attention. The Onceler is, even though the Onceler is supposed to be the bad guy, who we're not supposed to feel sympathy for. But the entire movie builds up sympathy for him by having him be the main character, and having him be all quirky and stuff. I'm not sure if the Mario movie does that, because really, Mario and Luigi, they're brothers, so I guess having a brother dynamic wouldn't be bad. And really the main problem with the Doom movie is that it gives any attention to the characters, because who cares about the characters I came here for some demons, and if you're only going to show demons in the last, few minutes of the movie, why did I even watch it? Excuse me if I sound like an idiot, but The Great Gatsby and the animated Lorax movie are pretty similar in the fact that both of their main characters are telling a story and recalling back to a time in their lives where their lives didn't suck, but in the present they do suck, and they wonder what they could have done to make things better. Well, first off, you shouldn't have had a page and a half of just listing random people who attended the party, Mr. The Great Gatsby. What was that about? If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about, the infamous start of Chapter 4, where it goes on for a page and a half, listing random people who attended Gatsby's party who will never ever be brought up ever again. We're working with a little over 100 pages here. I don't necessarily think it would be a good investment to have a page and a half of that be essentially filler. And this further contributes to my theory of Nick being psychic, because how would anyone remember this many randos? I wish we had an intellectual conversation about this in English class instead of that darn green light. I may be slightly a hypocrite for saying that wasting time is dumb, when essentially half of the time I spend talking about things are not necessarily talking about things, but talking about things adjacent to those things. So, in lieu of that, let us now reach a conclusion. Which is better, the book or the movie? Movies are better if you just want to relax, unless you're watching any of the driving scenes in The Great Gatsby, in which case you will not be relaxed, you will be at the edge of your seat, because those cars are going 150 miles an hour on a tiny little bridge. That's not safe, you're gonna kill someone, you crazy psychos. And books are generally better if you have absolutely nothing to do and can really focus on something. Focus on the themes, focus on the characters, focus on about 50 random people who will never be mentioned again, focus on the green light, focus on Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, focus on money, focus on parties, focus on, champagne and stuff. It really just requires a lot of focus. So really, what is better, the book or the movie? And I know this may seem like a square response, but I think that they can both exist in parallel. The book was created first, and then the movie took the ideas of the book, distorted them a little to make it unique, and told the story using visuals instead of just words. So to compare the two is like comparing apples and oranges. However, unlike comparing apples and oranges, I didn't really do that. Now, if the movie came first and then it was adapted into a book, it's most likely always going to suck. The movie will always be better, because it's a movie, it wasn't written to be a book. To clarify, what I'm talking about is when some animated movie comes out, and then there's a scholastic mini, quote-unquote, chapter book novel that comes out, which is just a crappy retelling of the movie, with a few, screenshots instead of actual illustrations. You're not a novel. Where's your little over 100 pages, an inexplicable start of Chapter 4? If you don't have a Chapter 4 that starts with random people being named for a page and a half, you're not a real novel, in my scholarly opinion. This has been Billy Nut Joe's Rant. Drive safe, and I hope you enjoy. Are you a fan of water? I'm a fan of water. Water is one of my favorite things. Not really, but it's still a necessary thing in survival. And water doesn't just come in liquid form. No. Because there's this thing called the water cycle, which involves all three phases of matter, which is basically a fancy way of saying how fast something's particles are, which is basically a fancy way of saying how solid something is versus how airy, I guess. Solid, liquid, gas. The three phases of matter. Solid, liquid, gas. What I've been taught since 3rd grade. Solid, liquid, gas. Solid form of water is ice. The liquid form of water is, well, and the gas form of water is water vapor. VAPOR. And those are the three phases of matter. That's what makes the phases of matter so simple. There are only 3 of them. Unlike the periodical table of elements, where there are over 100, most of which have names that are over 5 letters long. But nope, not with the phases of matter. Solid, liquid, gas. Easy, simple, fake. I'm sorry, but if you've ever been told that there are 3 phases of matter, then you have been lied to. It's quite traumatizing, I know, because apparently there's a 4th, even more vaporous form of matter above water vapor, or gas, to be more general, and that 4th mysterious state of matter goes by the name of plasma. What? Plasma? You mean that stuff that's in the blood? What? Plasma? You mean that gun that goes boom, 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 boom? Yes, plasma. That thing that's often used in sci-fi, as lasers and stuff. Apparently it's real, and also, apparently, it's a phase of matter somehow. But this didn't come completely out of left field before, because I've heard of a 4th state of matter before. Usually whenever someone's talking about it, liquid, solid, gas, someone always out there just says, oh, and don't forget plasma. Ha, what a cheeky fellow. Plasma's not a state of matter. Little did I know it was. It's like one of those things that you hear, and you sort of trust, because you have no reason not to trust it. Like always choosing C on a multiple choice question if you don't know, because apparently that's the most likely answer. Or letting your sugarcane grow on sand instead of dirt in Minecraft. I'm not entirely sure on that C one, but I know that the sand and dirt doesn't matter. But it's like that. who knows if it's true? But let's take a breather and discuss what is plasma. Well, as I previously said, states of matter are determined by how quickly their particles move, which then makes up their physical substance. So for example, solids particles move very slowly, so things don't pass through them. Water's particles move slightly faster, enough that they can keep a shape in the container that they're in, but not enough that they're completely impenetrable. And gas just goes wherever it wants, so it'll always be displaced, usually. Plasma apparently has a particle speed above gas, which makes it hotter. Although I'm not sure of the physical capabilities of plasma, as unlike the others, touching plasma hurts. I assume. I mean, going back to the whole sci-fi thing, you don't see people shooting aliens with water guns. No, they're shooting aliens with plasma guns, which obviously must do more damage. But I know the third grader in all of us is asking one question. Does plasma ruin the whole water cycle phases of matter comparison? Thankfully, no. Because as we know, solid in the water cycle is, well, I guess it's not really in the water cycle, but I suppose if it's somewhere really cold, it might freeze over. Water is water. It's liquid. And water vapor that condensates into a cloud, that is the gas. Where does the plasma come in? Thunderstorms. Yes, because lightning is a plasma, which means that we've all seen plasma at some point. Strange to think that it's just now being considered as an actual phase of matter. Oh wait, it's been considered a phase of matter since like the 1800s. I think they really need to update those third grade curriculums. Before we continue any further, I am aware of the whole Bose-Einstein other phases of matter. But as I said before, I'm not talking about quantum mechanics. And also, that's quite possibly the dumbest name for a phase of matter. Everything else was just one word. Bose-Einstein? More like Bozo-Einstein. Where can plasma be found? Well, obviously, as I previously said, lightning. Though not the thunder part, because that's more of a sound. How is that sound made? I don't remember, but it's a pretty cool sound. And the lightning that comes after illuminates everything, so you should have a good time finding it, even though by the time you've looked in the direction, it's probably already miles gone. Other places you can find plasma apparently include fluorescent lights, which explains why schools don't teach this in the early years of education, because the schools will be concerned that the fluorescent light companies will pull funding due to students being afraid that they'll be shocked with lasers. Now that I think about it, it makes sense that plasma is a separate state of matter, because when you think about it, what even is lightning? It's obviously not a solid, because it can't be grasped. It's not a liquid, because people don't order cafe cone lightning. And it's not a gas, because it obviously has a shape. A weird root-like tree shape, but still a shape. And you don't consider trees plasma, so obviously it can't be any of those things. In fact, I feel confident in saying that plasma, and its other obtuse state of matter brethren, are all the only states of matter that are not edible. Isn't that fun? Another example of plasma is Aurora Borealis. Yes, the northern lights are actually made of plasma. How do they occur? Something with sunbeams caught in the atmosphere, or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, so I won't speak of it. But yes, the Aurora Borealis is plasma, and yes, it is very hot. Which means, theoretically, if you bunched up all the northern lights and threw them at someone's face, that person would be subliminized. Notice how I say subliminized and not evaporated, because evaporation refers to a liquid turning into a gas, which, while yes, the body is made up of partially liquid, it's mostly solid. And I'd think that most people would agree that they identify as a solid and not a liquid or a gas, and the process for a solid being turned directly into a gas is called sublimation. There's something to impress your third grade teacher. Some other examples of semi-everyday items that involve plasma are welding irons. You know those things that have those masks that go flip-flop, flip-flop, and there's a little rectangular thing that you look through, and it gets really hot? And to a lesser extent, soldering irons, which is probably why, if you've used or been near a soldering iron or welding torch, then you might get a headache afterward. That's because of the intense heat that you're being exposed to. We people who suffer that are scientifically referred to as woozy around heat. It may have something else to do with the subliminized metals in the air, but surely it's the heat, right? Wow, I wish Jelly was here to hear about this. She's also a big fan of water.
No, nut job, take this out. I just found a piece of the Aruba banalis.
Nova, no! If you're into dumb fun facts like me, then one you've probably heard before is, if you fold a piece of paper 42 times, it'll reach the moon. This is interesting because at first glance, it seems stupid. It's just a piece of paper. You can't reach the moon. At second glance, oh yeah, when you fold a piece of paper, it gets about twice as thick. And every time you fold it after that, it gets exponentially thicker, until it's impractical to fold anymore. Breaking that limit and somehow folding it 42 times, yeah, maybe it could reach the moon. So if it really was practical to fold a piece of paper 42 times to reach the moon, and you're rich enough to afford that much paper, you'd probably be rich enough to also afford an astronaut suit, and then you could climb the piece of paper all the way to the moon. Except, the moon's turning and the Earth's turning and they're rotating around each other. So you might run into some complications there. But other than that, it seems perfectly sound. One of the benefits of having everyone have separate computers in school is, oh yeah, kids, we're saving on paper. Yeah, you're not going to like my next arts and crafts project, I can tell you that much. Another similarly impractical fun thing to say is seashells by the seashore. Seashells by the seashore. Which is not only fun to say, and an excellent tongue twister, as morbid as that sounds, it also brings up the fact that whoever she is doesn't seem to understand location in business. Why would I buy your seashells when there are perfectly good ones resting here at the seashore? She sells seashells by the Antarctic Research Center would make a lot more sense. Although I'm not sure what Antarctic scientists would need shells for, but maybe she could pass them off as some sort of ammonite. Deception. Now you're learning. Is taking advantage of gullible scientists okay? No, not necessarily, because scientists sometimes know their stuff. For example, another commonly said fun fact is that if the sun were to explode, it would take around 7 or 8 minutes for anyone to realize because of the way that light travels, the speed of light, and how far away the sun is from Earth. It takes 7 or 8 minutes. I beg to differ, because if the sun exploded, I'm sure that scientists would figure it out, because they have telescopes pointed at that stuff all the time. And also, before anyone noticed could really be simplified to before everything was incinerated. In which case, who cares how long it took the sun to explode? It exploded. On the topic of astronomy and exploding stars, the very popular star, Betelgeuse, seems to be on its last legs, because recently scientists have been reporting that it's probably going to, well, I'm not going to say the proper term, because I don't want to attract you-know-who, but it's going to explode soon, which is quite unfortunate, because they made a whole movie about that thing. And I'm no expert on the situation, but judging by the whole 7 or 8 minute sun thing, and the sun being, in terms of space nerdiness, relatively close to the Earth, I can't imagine that the explosion of Betelgeuse would be very instantaneous. It'd probably take a long time for that light to actually reach the Earth. In fact, that brings up another fun fact that's often heard, is that most of the stars you see in the sky could already have exploded, and we wouldn't know, because it just takes that long to reach. If only there was a way to reboot the Milky Way's internet, to get these connections running faster, because this is ridiculous. What's the point of knowing when a star is going to explode if it's not going to explode? Impractical things are all around. Like, for example, everyone knows that on Earth, a year is about a year, 365 or 6 days. And it would make sense on knowing how long a year is on Earth, because after all, everyone lives on Earth. And also maybe Mars, considering that's one of the few planets that are being considered for eventual colonization. But please, tell me, why would anyone care about the length of a year on all the gas giants? Who cares how long a year is on those planets? No one's ever going to step foot on those planets, because there's no place to step. It's just a big ball of color and gas, and nothing else. Although I suppose it's good that we do know. Not that it'll ever be applied for much. You could write a letter to a Saturn citizen, but good luck getting a very educated response, because the life expectancy on Saturn is only about 4 years or so. And if we're talking about impracticalities, space itself is pretty impractical. Nearly infinite, vast expanses. Of what? Nothing. No one can do anything in this void. It's simply there for the sake of holding everything together, which I guess serves a purpose, but not a very fun one. While outer space may be creatively impractical, as there's nothing to do out there, inner space, as in inside of our own atmosphere, while yes, it has everything, sometimes everything isn't enough. For example, think of those miles and miles of space between ground level and the atmosphere. There's only one place to go, upwards. And building upwards is a hassle, so many people who are interested in building won't get to go the full distance. In fact, no one has gone the full distance. Because I'm not sure that's technologically possible, because of the way the atmosphere works. But still, until the day comes when someone's really good at origami, I don't think anything man-made is going to break the Earth's atmosphere and still connect to the ground. And even when space architecture becomes practical, there's still the impracticalities that come with sci-fi building in general. For example, doors. How does a door work in real life? It has 2 hinges, and it goes wah, 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 in one direction when you open it. How do doors work on space stations? Or alien oil rigs? They retract completely into the walls, sometimes splitting before retracting into the walls. How annoying. What if I wanted to hang a calendar or a dartboard there? Darn. I guess I'm out of luck. And also, in actual photos of real space stations that don't have any of that sci-fi silliness, it always seems that there's a whole lot of buttons and switches and levers on all sides of the ship. which I guess makes sense spatially, because if you have no floor, because you can just float, why not put buttons everywhere to control the ship better in a more compact space? I don't know, it just seems sort of stressful, knowing that if you accidentally bump into a wall, you could press like the self-destruct button. I sure hope that they didn't install one of those, but still. Oh, here's an idea. The future of engineering. Step 1, build a watertight house. Why is it watertight? Step 2, fill the house with water. Now you can put all sorts of appliances all over the house, as long as they don't use electricity. Who needs floor space when you have all of the space? Just be sure to always don your wetsuit and never try to dry your hair. But the most impractical thing of all is when you can't think of something to do. For example, about 3 minutes ago, I saw this guy who just started talking about things that are impractical, and then started talking about space and stuff. I don't know, it was pretty stupid. This has been Billy Neto's Rant, and I hope you enjoyed.
Worry not for the delay. I have heard the bride will be arriving shortly. And then the wedding can... Cheryl, what are you wearing?
Well, I couldn't exactly find the right outfit, so this is close enough, right?
Yeah, but did you really need the helmet?
Yes, I think it adds allure to the character, and also the show must go on and stuff. Now quickly, get back to marrying me before anyone notices.
I pronounce you husband and, astronaut, I suppose. You know, you'd think I'd remember this part, but I really don't.